Rethinking Magic, Collective Consciousness and Thoughtwaves by Vicar Lee. Posted to Week in Weird on December 7th, 2012. The thought wave is an ancient concept, although it sounds ultra-modernist and perhaps a bit new agey. All the same, they are real and potent factors in the history of the human species. These are literally waves of conceptual energy arising from singular individuals or influential groups responsible for inspiration, creation, and motivation. They travel in waves and act as the waves of the ocean, whence the ancient masters derived the concept. Thought waves roll in, break, and recede. They also return. It is possible for them to be generated in such a way, and to gather energy by various means, so that a thought tsunami can be generated, sweeping all opposition aside and dominating for as long as an age. This is among the most basic and powerful of the arts of manipulation by mystical and unconscious mechanisms, and so it is a fitting place to start the education of the uninitiated and to enhance the knowledge of those who are initiates, seekers, walkers, adepts, and even masters. It is possible in the Hermetic secrets to have great power while also having limited knowledge. Let him or her who is without doubts proceed. Why do you care about thought waves? Because these are the prime movers of your society, the prime movers of every society, and they are created by individuals contracted to do so by the power elite of the world. But we aren't talking about ad agencies. The people responsible for thought wave design, construction, and implementation are wizards, plain and simple. The trend and the thought wave are related and sometimes analogous. Sometimes they are one in the same thing. We can consider theories like evolution or religions like Islam and recognize that they are driven by thought wave technology to become the dominant forces of their time, region, or civilization. What matters most in this from the Hermetic point of view is that such things are not, as often insisted upon by adherents, validated by fact, reason, or logic. Rather, the adherents of these views regard them as absolute truths because they are caught up in the thought wave. Who can resist the tides? A thought wave is not the same concept as being on a wavelength with another human being or group of people. This is in fact a question of two very different concepts that have been overlapped and confused in recent memory, largely by hippies and other New Age characters, some well-meaning and some totally full of it and out to make a buck. As a word to the wise, we must recall that even in a regulated society and a controlled market economy, the buyer beware rule stands. The cunning are apt to find a way around any system of regulation. The notion of the thought wave arises out of Hermetic and occult philosophy and is actualized in certain formal systems in our era. It was not previously possible to actually watch a thought wave at work in ancient times. Today, we can monitor internet traffic and systems like Twitter and Reddit to see how information is spread and how it comes to be integrated into a collective conversation. And we can demonstrate and understand that thought waves make UFOs appear in our skies, or at least in our imagery. Ghosts stalk deserted sites, as well as businesses in need of a marketing boost, and conspiracies sprout even in the most mundane of endeavors. With thought waves under your control, anything is possible. Murderers become patsies, and politically motivated revolutionaries become madmen. There's a label category over at the Vicar's Lamp called Weak Fools Who Obey the Media Thought Wave. Now, The lamp is admittedly a form of meta-satire designed to communicate messages between different parishes within the organization of Athena's men, but the communiques are ideally designed to serve dual purposes, also encouraging the readership to consider the unknown and to expand the horizons of the intellect, the heart, and the soul. We'd need an exercise and nutrition blog to get the proper physical concerns in as well, but you get the point. The lamp is organized like the whole of the order of Athena's men, to generate thought waves. In this respect, it is counter-media. Occult orders come in many stripes and colors, but only a few are powerful enough, with memberships numerous enough, to impart power to the thought waves they produce. This is real magic, not the dagger-wielding, hand-sign-waving, mumbo-jumbo jabbering sort. There are no mystical herbal concoctions necessary. Real sorcerers do not meddle with such things. Indeed, within the occult orders, it is common to identify magic as falling into three broad categories: low magic, worked for entertainment; ritual magic, undertaken as a religious rite or activity; and sorcery, an effective tool for altering reality in a pre-planned and organized fashion. The latter category requires no hats, robes, wands, cards, ground-up leaves, eyes of newt, potions, vials, phylactery, or alchemy. Low magic is the stage stuff you see David Copperfield and the street stuff you see David Blaine do. The reliance upon psychology and misdirection makes that kind of magic quite real, but it is sharply limited by dependence upon tools and technology. Do not overlook the subtle but obvious truth buried herein. The use of sorcery is marked and clearly denoted by reliance upon psychological manipulation. An important key to unlocking the mysteries of how the world around us really works is rethinking magic. This is not the artifice of a dead religion, and it is not the simpleton's delight. Real magic exists, and it is regularly used in this world to manipulate. Much of what the average person does on a daily basis was conditioned into their conceptual matrix by a syzygy of forces that include many recognized disciplines and techniques. When used in perfect conjunction, they are almost irresistible and, by definition, magical. For some, this is a disappointing truth, but only because there is a tendency to want Gandalf to somehow be real. Balrogs and invincibility globes and you shall not pass are far more interesting than widespread and large-scale schemes of mind control worked upon whole masses of people, at least from a certain point of view. But this fails to take into account the more overt reality we often do not place any credence in at all. Hitler was a sorcerer, and so too Mao Zedong. FDR and JFK were not, any more than was Washington or Lincoln. But Benjamin Franklin was a sorcerer, and he knew it, and had no qualms about playing the Merlin to a fledgling nation-state. There is an extensive list of real sorcerers, few of whose names would be recognizable to the average person. Good sorcerers do not have to be famous. It is far better if they are not. Subtlety in all things is essential, for a thought wave has vast power if it is unmoored from its originator and appears to those swept by it to have simply emerged as an organic function of the collective consciousness. In the true occult orders, it is often said, ars celare artem, and by this it is meant that if one cannot conceal what one is up to, one should get one's ass back to school. There is much to be learned in the path of magic. 90% of what you can read in books is utter bullshit. The other 10% serves to point you in the right direction. That direction generally involves searching hard. This doesn't mean spending hours on the internet. Only a few things of worth in the occult are in the public domain. Consider what occult actually means, and you can see why at once. Real knowledge will wander over to you and lay in your lap quite without warning, or else It lies at the top of a very dangerous mountain and demands your deepest reserves of courage and will to achieve. Power is either worth sacrifice or it is not. There are two schools of thought regarding the generation and use of thought waves. One argues that these are natural to the collective consciousness anyway, and that it is therefore utterly reasonable to have people be periodically caught up in one craze or another. A different view holds that thought waves do not randomly arise, but always represent the interests of one or another occult faction. And this should be borne in mind at all times. James Madison wrote of factions in political terms in the Federalist paper, known as Number 10. Political scientists enjoy this argument on the nature and utility of factions within a republic for a variety of reasons, and choose inevitably, due to thought waves, to ignore the fact that Madison wrote Federalist 10 under the pseudonym Publius. He referenced the classical age in this, and thereby referenced things of significance from that era. Factionally speaking, he will have therefore referred to mystery cults, the innermost membership of various religious beliefs of the era. In our own time, these have survived in the form of occult orders, hence names like the Illuminati. Who was the illuminator of Greco-Roman classicism in religious terms? It is Apollo, of course. And so his name is given to the most significant of all human achievements to date, the moon landing. Hence, too, Athena's men, for each order takes a name from the principle that guides it. Who was the patroness of civilized life, of the city, of democracy and just governance? Athena. These are the original thought waves, marketing ploys so subtle they qualify as magic rather than simple psychology, since the mechanisms of action are more mystical than cognitive in form and function. Madison did not want you to know of which factions he was speaking, but Athena's men have since changed their minds. It's time some people did know, particularly those who will listen. Not every mystery cult has been the most positive in its development over the past few centuries since their transformation into occult orders around the time of the Renaissance. Some are in fact downright sinister and bent upon world domination. Thought waves control you. They frame individual thought and dominate the discourse in the public and private arenas. They dictate by establishing frequencies of cognition that drown out or else scramble all other efforts at framing and directing inquiry or communication. If you find yourself still in doubt, recognize that our very languages and the rules thereof constitute thought waves governing proper interaction and the mechanisms of conceptual exchange. Marketing is sorcery in this regard, and so too philosophy, faith, theology, music, film, and comedy. But the difference is that some of these endeavors are directed by those in the know. The run-of-the-mill stuff may make you buy a particular pizza on a particular Sunday, whereas the good shit will make you riot and burn down LA. Some things are random occurrences or represent perfect storms of activity and cognition in all likelihood, but we must also consider the implications of non-human agency in our own world. There are fae, and none of us really understand them or recognize established limits to their powers. They may be responsible for a great many things, good and bad, for humankind throughout our history, as the Venerable Jacques Vallée has pointed out. What can you do about thought waves? Learn to recognize them, and learn to backtrack them to their likely sources, much like dealing with the secret code in this very article. Understand who is responsible for controlling people, why, and for what purposes. Recognize that the real power brokers of our world do things through agencies that allow them to prosper and remain largely uninvolved in micromanagement. The secret conspiracies are casual and very easily rendered effective in the day-to-day world, sans any cloak and dagger or mysticism. The deeper and more complex mysteries involve things too mind-blowing to go into here. Compartmentalization is essential to the whole of modern affairs, because people who do not know they are part of an agenda of domination and enslavement are much more likely to be effective at implementing that agenda. People who know what they are doing to their fellows are liable to feel guilt and internal conflict. The last thing our masters want is for the overseers to awaken, because then they might also awaken the slaves.